The boss fights in Final Fantasy XIV are like a dance, and each role involved in that dance, the tanks, the healers, and the damage dealers, are responsible for learning different steps. Today we're going to talk about the tank-specific mechanics in Susano Extreme, and some fundamentals that you can take with you into future boss fights. Part of the fun of playing FF14 comes from learning and optimizing a boss battle for the first time. Open your battle log and watch the numbers fly across your screen, but pay extra attention to the numbers that are directed at you. Obviously, you should try to optimize your damage per second so the boss you're fighting dies faster, but if you're not paying attention to what the boss is doing, you'll die faster. And if you die, everybody dies, or at the very least you're wasting the healer's MP, which is a precious resource. Now let's talk about how this relates to Susano Extreme. The Suzano starts off with 2 auto attacks and follows with an untelegraphed tank buster called Assail. If your healers aren't sleeping or vaping or wiping Cheetos dust off their keyboards, this attack is nothing to worry about. In fact, you should be able to survive without activating any cooldowns, but you're not lazy, so that's not what you want. Regardless of what the meta dictates, your goal as a tank is to optimize how you take damage. How you do this differs based on which tank you're playing, but there are some universal tools that all tanks can use to cut down the amount of required healing for the first few seconds of this fight and beyond. Suzano uses Assail on a rotation, so it's possible to mitigate it every time. Rampart and Reprisal are the universal tools that will make this move feel like a swift punch in the face. Warriors can stack Inner Beast and several other cooldowns on top of that to further reduce the incoming damage. The same is true for the other tanks. The trick is making sure you don't blow your entire load at the same time, because that move comes up 3 times during the first phase. After the first Assail, each subsequent attack comes after Brightstorm and 2 auto attacks. Brightstorm is the move that requires the group to stack together to reduce the incoming damage. The rotation I like to use to mitigate this attack is on screen now. It's a little different for the other tanks because their job-specific cooldowns are different. Dark Knights can use the Blackest Night, kind of like Inner Beast, and the same goes for Paladins with Sheltron, but the principle is the same. Find a rotation that allows you to reduce the damage you take of each of these big hits so your healers don't have to sweat as much. While we're on the subject of rotations, figuring out an intelligent way to rotate your cooldowns will also help reduce the amount of healing you require throughout a boss fight. The way you rotate them depends on the type of attacks the bosses use and how much you need to use to mitigate them. If you're playing as the Warrior or Dark Knight, you'll have some tools in your kit that only reduce physical damage taken, others that only reduce magic damage taken, and some that work for both. If the tank buster you need to mitigate is made of magic and fairy dust, then you can use your physical cooldowns during the portions of the fight when the boss is just auto-attacking. If the boss's auto-attacks are magic as well, then cooldowns like Raw Intuition and Anticipation become useless, but there are plenty of other ways to compensate. Most major boss fights in this game have transition phases, but so far, Suzano has the coolest one. He pulls out his big sword and tries to slam it on the battlefield, but you can't let him do that because you're the Warrior of Light, or the Paladin of Light, or the Dark Knight of Light. So, when the transition starts, click on the icon and start button mashing to ward off the giant sword. After successfully defending, Suzano readies a second attack, but this time because you have a slashing resist down debuff, your group's second tank will have to take your place while you deal with a secondary mechanic, one that's pretty common in this game. 4 blue balls will spawn around the edges of the ring, and it's your job to intercept them before they reach the rest of your group members. They don't deal too much damage individually, but you cannot take all 4 of them without receiving some support from your group's healers or activating a self-healing ability. Be sure to activate a cooldown to reduce the damage you take. The second phase of this fight is where things start to get crazy, but they're a lot more fun for a tank. It incorporates nearly every tank-specific mechanic you'll see in Final Fantasy XIV. Suzano starts doing more damage to the party and to the tanks. The main tank buster to look out for is called Storm Splitter, and unlike Assail, if you don't activate cooldowns for this, it's gonna hurt really badly. And Storm Splitter also places a slashing resist down debuff on you after it hits, and surprise surprise, Suzano deals slashing damage. For this reason, after getting hit with this attack, you'll want to swap positions with your group's second tank. This is done by using Provoke followed by an enmity generating ability. It's possible to tank through the slashing resist debuff, but besides wanting to prove that you have the biggest cojones in the group, once you run out of cooldowns, you're making the healers do a lot of unnecessary heavy lifting. The Storm Splitter always comes at the end of a long chain of moves that you and the party have to respond to accordingly, so it's important that you don't blow your main cooldowns before they're needed. Additionally, 2 new moves, Levin Bolt and Sealed Gate, are added into the list. Levin Bolt places a purple marker over a target player's head. That player needs to cross over the sunken place that was created when the fight transitioned to Phase 2 in order to prevent the damage from hitting the entire group. The marks will go out to 4 players one at a time, but it will never target the main tank. Sometimes though, if you're slow when switching from main tank to off tank, you'll get the purple mark and you'll have to do the mechanic. This next part is a variation on the Levin Bolt attack that requires extra input from the tanks. This time, instead of watching your party members scramble from left to right, you and everyone that isn't marked will have to scramble from left to right to avoid getting zapped. As the tank though, you can help lessen the burden on your healers by using some light cooldowns, namely Awareness, Rampart, Convalescence, anything you have in your kit that isn't necessary for defending against Storm Splitter. The reason for this is because Suzano does not have a chill button. While Levin Bolt is going off, Suzano will continue to slice you in the face. So there you go. There are other mechanics involved in the Susano Extreme boss fight, but they're not tank specific, so I'll leave those for the other Final Fantasy XIV YouTube content creators to cover. On that note, you're not only going to see tank related content on this channel, I am currently working on some things for the DPS classes as well. With all of that said, the name of the game, I'm about 50% sure that it is Final Fantasy XIV. The name of the channel, I know for a fact, it is iBluairJgR Gaming for Comedy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment because I like to print them out, put them in a nice picture frame, and hang them on my wall. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.